I'm sure you all know what this video is about. The MCU has undergone a rough, let's say, entirety of Phase 4, with many fans decrying the drop in quality. Some fans will argue that the humor of the MCU is now stale, with Thor Love and Thunder being their go-to example. Others will point out how many shows we need to watch in order to get the whole Phase 4, and I'm one of these people. I think 17 movies and TV shows is excessive. There are those who point to the dubious quality of the special effects, which I can also agree to an extent. Movies are an audiovisual medium after all. And then there are the people who just dislike the premise of these movies and shows, which is fair. My issue is with the overall storyline of the MCU post Thanos. I'm not a fan of the debut of the multiverse. I much prefer the post snap status quo of the MCU because there's ripe story potential here. 5 years have passed since the snap happened. 5 years. You have a nice overarching theme that ties everything and everyone together since everyone was affected by it in some way. Yet, I don't recall it being a major plot point except during Falcon and Winter Soldier, or WandaVision, or Far From Home. The MCU had a reasonable unifying status quo they could have just rallied behind, but they didn't go that direction for some reason. Personal feelings on what should have happened aside, let's discuss what I think is the true issue with what did actually happen, and how everything is either a comorbidity or a comorbidity of a comorbidity. For a moment, let's think back to Phase 1. Phase 1 consisted of 6 movies and 0 shows you needed to watch, but connectivity didn't reach a high until The Avengers. Phase 4 is very much a throwback to Phase 1. We are throwing concepts at the wall and seeing what works and what doesn't. Except this is not Phase 1 anymore. Sure, 7 movies is comparable to Phase 1's 6 movies, but we have like half a dozen TV series plus the Phase 5 stuff. I'm not inherently against throwing stuff at the wall, but I would like to see something tying them all together. But if you look at Phase 1 and 2, it wasn't always about Thanos tying them together. Yes, Phase 1 threw characters at a wall and hoped they stuck, but Phase 2 built off of them. We really didn't get anything outside the scope of the big three besides Guardians of the Galaxy and Ant-Man. Thanos didn't really start being much of his own threat until Phase 3. The scope of the conflicts in Phase 1 and 2 were either personal or just a byproduct rather than the direct actions of Thanos. Tony Stark, for example, became obsessed with stopping threats and preventing them in wake of what he saw in the wormhole. While it was Thanos related, it was Tony's reaction to what Thanos did and his own actions against that. Loki, being in chains for what he did during the Avengers, was a big part of Thor the Dark World. Project Insight came out of both Stark technology and the desire to protect the world, given the invasion of New York. Not to mention, it was also building off of Hydra's storyline, which was from the first Avengers. But in Phase 4, we do not get that. We get throwing stuff at the wall. And after about 17 projects, so far, we are yet to see any progression. So when Kamala mentions the Avengers in the Marvels trailer, I'm not interested, I'm baffled instead. Who are the Avengers? Who's leading them? Where are their headquarters right now, since the two headquarters we know got either bought out or blown up? Okay, so is Falcon and Winter Soldier leading them? Okay, what time is this? And why do we need to go fight this Kang guy? I mean, Kang is such a non-entity, he's isolated in one show and one movie. Hard to justify making this guy and the various versions of him the big bad when you have very little in the way of foundations for what heroes need to do. And that, my viewers, is probably the crux of the issue. We have so many projects and not a clear direction. We are sitting at the foundational levels of the plot. It's hard to say where in Freytag's pyramid we are because we don't know what the direction of this is. Kang is ultimately our big bad, but he's a big bad without heroes to face, which is just boring. There's also the threat of the incursions, which visually I think is stunning, but at the same time, what's the point if you're just going to isolate it to just Doctor Strange? Frankly, I'm just baffled why we're not having multiple incarnations of Kang be the main antagonist through each of these projects, or have an agent of Kang be the antagonist. That will help tie things together. There's also the practical issues with the multiverse being a driving force. For a moment, let's say I had a problem, and then I had another problem down the line, and I said that problem is a million times bigger than the original. Let's say I pulled someone else in who had the same original problem, and he says instead it's a billion times worse for the next problem. On a practical level, There is no distinction between a million and a billion in terms of emotional scope. Yes, we have multiple worlds, but at the same time, is there much difference between having an alternate Earth and an alternate, and not even an alternate world? It's just an alien planet with just human-like people? No, not really. I'm going to eventually start rambling about the multiverse and how it's not much different in terms of scale when it comes to comparing it with Thanos, but that's a completely different conversation, and I don't want to ramble any further. So this is Cyril signing off.